Keanu Reeves sat quietly in the corner of his dressing room, his hands resting on his knees, eyes fixed on the floor. He had been invited to a popular TV show that celebrated inspirational journeys. It wasn't the kind of thing he usually said yes to. Keanu had always been private about his life. Fame never changed that. He didn't like to talk about himself too much, and he definitely didn't like surprises. But the producers had been gentle and respectful. They said it would be a tribute, a look back at his journey, the people who helped him along the way, and the lessons he learned. He had agreed not because he wanted attention, but because he thought maybe, just maybe, it could remind people that kindness and perseverance still mattered in the world. The dressing room was quiet except for the faint hum of voices and movement from the hallway. Assistants rushed back and forth, checking cameras, microphones, and lights. A young crew member knocked on the door gently and peeked in. "Mr. Reeves, we're ready for you in 5, she said with a nervous smile. Keanu looked up, smiled softly, and nodded. "Thank you," he said, his voice calm and low. As she left, he took a deep breath. He looked at his reflection in the mirror. The man staring back was older now, lines around his eyes, silver in his beard, but the same gentle expression he had always carried. He thought about how far life had taken him, from a restless kid with big dreams to a man who had seen both incredible success and deep loss. When the stage manager finally called him, Keanu stood up, straightened his jacket, and walked down the long hallway toward the bright studio lights. The air grew warmer as he neared the stage. The audience's murmurs blended with the upbeat music playing in the background. The host greeted him with open arms and a big smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome one of the most beloved actors in Hollywood, Keanu Reeves." The crowd erupted in applause. Some even stood. Keanu smiled shyly, gave a small wave, and sat down on the comfortable couch across from the host. He didn't like loud entrances or big speeches. He preferred to listen first. The host began with easy questions about his early movies, his favorite roles, and the things that inspired him. Keanu answered with his usual modesty, often turning the attention back to others. When asked about his success, he said, "I've just been lucky to work with good people." When asked about fame, he laughed softly and said, "It's not real life. Real life is what happens when no one's watching." The audience admired his honesty. They laughed when he laughed and grew quiet when he spoke seriously. There was something grounding about him, as if, even with all his fame, he still belonged to the same ordinary world as everyone else. After a while, the host leaned forward, his tone shifting slightly. "Keanu, you've had an incredible journey," he said. "But we know no one walks that road alone. There are always people who help shape who we become. Today we have a little surprise for you." Keanu raised an eyebrow, half smiling. "A surprise?" he asked, almost suspiciously. The host chuckled. "Yes, but don't worry, it's a good one." The big screen behind them flickered to life. Soft piano music began to play as old black and white photos appeared. Pictures of a teenage Keanu on stage, rehearsing lines in a school play, smiling nervously in front of a small audience. The crowd let out soft ahs. Keanu leaned back, a little stunned. He hadn't seen those photos in years. He laughed quietly. "Where did you find these?" he asked, clearly touched. The host grinned. "We did our homework." The screen then cut to short clips of interviews with people who had known Keanu from his early life. An old friend, a former classmate, a film crew member from one of his first movies. They all spoke about how kind and hard-working he had been even back then. "He was always the first to show up and the last to leave," one man said. "He cared about everyone, even when he didn't have to." Keanu smiled modestly but shifted in his seat. Compliments always made him a little uncomfortable. The host noticed and said lightly, "You've always been humble, Keanu, but I think there's one person who might want to remind you just how far you've come." Keanu tilted his head slightly, unsure what that meant. The host paused for effect. The lights dimmed slightly and the music changed. Softer now, slower, almost emotional. "Tonight," the host continued, "we've invited someone very special. Someone from your past. Someone who saw your potential long before the rest of the world did." The audience murmured curiously. Keanu's expression shifted from polite curiosity to genuine surprise. "From my past?" he asked quietly. The host nodded. "Yes. Someone who says you changed his life as much as he changed yours." Keanu frowned slightly, trying to think. He'd had mentors and friends, directors and colleagues who had guided him. But who could it be? The host didn't answer. Instead, he gestured toward the side of the stage. The audience turned. Keanu followed their gaze, his eyes narrowing in confusion, as a tall figure slowly walked out from the shadows. The man had gray hair, glasses, and the kind of calm presence that filled the room without saying a word. The moment Keanu saw his face, his breath caught in his throat. He whispered softly, "No way." The man smiled kindly. The audience gasped as the host announced, "Please welcome Keanu's high school drama teacher, Mr. Henderson." For a split second, Keanu didn't move. He looked frozen, as if his mind needed a moment to process what his eyes were seeing. Then he stood up quickly, his face breaking into the warmest, most genuine smile anyone in the room had ever seen. He walked straight across the stage and wrapped his arms around the older man. The crowd clapped and cheered. Cameras flashed. For a moment, the noise faded. It was just the two of them, teacher and student meeting again after so many years. When they finally sat down together, Keanu wiped his eyes slightly and laughed. "I can't believe this. How long has it been?" Mr. Henderson chuckled. "Too long, my boy. Too long." The host smiled, clearly moved. "We found Mr. Henderson in Canada," he explained. "He told us stories about your school days, how you were always full of energy, always asking questions, always trying to make others laugh." Keanu shook his head, laughing softly. "I was probably a bit of trouble, too." Mr. Henderson smiled and nodded playfully. "Oh, you were. But you also had something special. You cared about people. You cared about the work. That's what made you different." The crowd fell quiet. Keanu looked down for a moment, visibly touched. You could see memories flooding back. The small theater room, the smell of the stage curtains, the sound of applause after a school performance. "Mr. Henderson was the one who made me believe I could do this," Keanu said quietly. "When no one else thought I could, he did." The teacher reached over and patted his arm. "All I did was give you a little push," he said. "You did the rest." The host smiled, clearly sensing the power of the moment. "It's not every day we see something like this," he said softly. "A reunion between two people who changed each other's lives." Keanu nodded slowly, still looking at his old teacher with deep respect. "He was the first person who ever told me I had something to give," he said. That meant everything. The music swelled again and the audience applauded, some even wiping tears from their eyes. For the rest of the segment, Keanu and his teacher shared lighthearted memories, funny moments from school plays, small mistakes that turned into laughter, and lessons that stayed with him for decades. It was more than a TV moment. It was human, raw, real, and full of gratitude. As the cameras faded to a commercial break, Keanu leaned toward his teacher and said softly, "Thank you for coming. This means more than you know." Mr. Henderson smiled. "It means just as much to me, son. You made me proud." The lights dimmed slowly, but the warmth in the room didn't fade. The audience had seen something rare, a glimpse of real emotion in a world that often feels staged. And though no one knew what would be said next, or how deep the conversation would go, everyone could feel it. The story was just beginning. The audience was still clapping when the cameras turned back on. The bright studio lights felt softer now, almost warm like sunlight through a window. Keanu and his old teacher sat side by side, both smiling but still trying to take in the moment. It had been many years since they'd seen each other, but the connection between them was still strong. The host leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Henderson," he said kindly, "can you tell us how you first met Keanu? What kind of student was he back then?" The teacher chuckled and adjusted his glasses. "Oh, that takes me back," he said. "It was the first week of classes. I was teaching drama at the time, and most students were shy or just taking it because it seemed easy. But there was this one boy who stood out. He was always moving, always curious. He had this energy, like he was searching for something he couldn't quite name." Keanu smiled quietly, his eyes fixed on his old mentor. "He wasn't the top student," Mr. Henderson continued with a playful grin, "but he was one of the most passionate. If he forgot his lines, he'd laugh it off and keep going. If the lights didn't work, he'd offer to fix them. He just loved being there, in that little room pretending to be someone else for a while." The audience laughed softly. The host nodded. "So you could tell early on that he had something special?" Mr. Henderson paused. "Yes, he said slowly. But not because he was the best actor. It was because he cared. He cared about the story, about the other students, about the people behind the scenes. Most young people want to be the star. Keanu wanted everyone to shine. The camera turned to Keanu, who looked down with a shy smile. I don't know about that, he said quietly. I just wanted to belong somewhere. There was a brief silence in the studio. It wasn't awkward and it was emotional. The kind of silence that happens when something honest is said. The host leaned in gently. Belong somewhere? He asked. Keanu nodded. Yeah, back then my life was a bit all over the place. We moved around a lot. I didn't really have a steady home for a long time. School was the only place that felt stable, and drama class. He smiled, looking at his teacher. That was my safe place. It was where I could breathe. Mr. Henderson's eyes softened. I remember that, he said. You used to stay after class, help clean up, talk about movies. You had so many questions about life, about characters, about why people do what they do. Keanu laughed quietly. I probably annoyed you. The teacher shook his head. Not at all. You reminded me why I loved teaching. You had this spark. Even when things were tough, you didn't lose that. The audience listened closely. You could hear the faint hum of the cameras, but otherwise the room was still. The host smiled and asked, Do you remember the first time Keanu performed in front of an audience? Mr. Henderson's face lit up. Oh, yes. It was our school play, a small production we put together with almost no budget. We had to borrow costumes, paint our own sets, and the sound system barely worked. But Keanu didn't care. He took it seriously. He played this small role, a traveler with one important line near the end. But he treated that line like it was the most important moment in the world. Keanu chuckled, remembering. I was terrified. My hands were shaking. Mr. Henderson laughed. You were! But when the lights came on, and you said that line, something happened. The room went quiet. Everyone just watched you. You had this way of making people feel what your character felt. I knew then that you had something rare. The audience clapped softly. The host smiled. That's beautiful. Keanu looked over at his teacher. You were the one who made me believe I could do it, he said. I didn't think I was any good. I thought acting was for other people, confident people. But you saw something in me that I couldn't see myself. Mr. Henderson shook his head gently. You had it all along. I just gave you permission to trust it. Keanu's eyes glistened a little, and he looked away for a moment. The emotion in the room was strong but natural, not dramatic, just deeply human. The host let the silence breathe before asking, Mr. Henderson, do you remember any particular moment that stood out to you about Keanu during those school years? The teacher thought for a moment. There was one day, he said slowly. We were rehearsing after school. Everyone else had gone home, but Keanu stayed behind to help fix a broken prop. I asked him why he cared so much about a small thing like that. And he said, because every part of the story matters. He turned toward Keanu and smiled. I never forgot that. That line, it stayed with me all these years. Keanu blinked, remembering that day. I can't believe you remember that, he said softly. I do, Mr. Henderson said. And when I saw you years later wide on the big screen doing what you loved, I thought, that's still the same boy who believed every part of the story mattered. The host smiled warmly. That's such a powerful thing to say. The teacher nodded. Keanu taught me something too. Teaching isn't just about giving lessons. Sometimes the students teach you. Watching him grow reminded me that what we do, what we say, can change a life. Even in small ways, Keanu looked at him with deep gratitude. You changed mine, he said softly. The studio was silent again. The audience could feel the sincerity in his voice. It wasn't rehearsed or planned. It was real. The host spoke again, this time to Keanu. You know, a lot of people look up to you for your kindness and humility. Where do you think that comes from? Keanu paused, thinking carefully. Maybe from watching people like him, he said, nodding toward his teacher. He never treated anyone like they were less important. He respected everyone. The janitor, the shy kid in the back row, the stage crew. He taught me that success means nothing if you forget how to be kind. The host smiled. That's a lesson worth remembering. Mr. Henderson nodded proudly. He understood that even back then, he said. Fame didn't change him. He's still the same person he was in that little classroom. Keanu smiled, touched. Maybe a little older, he said, and everyone laughed. The host laughed too. Well, that's all of us. They spent the next few minutes sharing more lighthearted stories. How Keanu once forgot his costume and had to improvise, how he'd make everyone laugh backstage, and how he'd help calm nervous students before they performed. Each story revealed a little more about who he was, not as a celebrity, but as a human being who cared about others. The segment ended with a short video montage, photos of Keanu as a teenager, a clip from one of his earliest roles, and finally, a picture of him and Mr. Henderson together on stage after a school performance. The audience clapped warmly, some even standing to show their appreciation. As the applause faded, Keanu turned to his teacher and said quietly, "You know, I never got to say it before. Thank you. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." Mr. Henderson placed a hand on his shoulder. "You were meant for this," he said. "You just needed someone to remind you of that." The host smiled as the cameras slowly zoomed out. "We all have someone like that in our lives, someone who saw something in us before we did. Maybe tonight you'll remember yours." The lights dimmed and the audience began to clap again as the show went to a break. Keanu sat back, still smiling softly, his mind filled with memories of that small classroom, the wooden stage, the kind voice of his teacher telling him, "You can do this." And in that moment, surrounded by cameras and lights, he wasn't a movie star or a celebrity. He was just a man remembering where it all began, with a teacher who believed in him. The commercial break ended, and the cameras came back on. The audience cheered softly as the lights brightened once again. The host smiled and said, "Welcome back, everyone. We've been sharing an incredible reunion tonight, between Keanu Reeves and his former teacher, Mr. Henderson." The audience clapped again, and Keanu smiled politely, still a little overwhelmed. The emotion from the earlier moments hadn't faded. You could see it in his eyes, a mix of nostalgia, gratitude, and disbelief. The host continued, "Keanu, we've talked about your beginnings, your early struggles, and the people who shaped you. But we want to go a little deeper tonight. We want to talk about how those lessons from your school days carried into your life later on." Keanu nodded thoughtfully. "Sure," he said quietly. "I think most of who we become starts with people like our teachers. They give us the tools, not just for work, but for life." The host smiled. "And it's clear you've carried those lessons with you. But tonight we have a few surprises and things even you might not know." Keanu laughed softly. "You guys really like your surprises," he said, and the audience chuckled. The big screen behind them lit up again, showing clips from some of Keanu's earliest films, scenes from his first auditions, grainy behind-the-scenes footage, and interviews where he looked young, nervous, and full of energy. The host explained, "These are from the early days. You were still learning, still trying to find your place. Can you tell us what was going through your mind back then?" Keanu smiled faintly watching the clips. "Mostly fear," he said. "I didn't know if I belonged. Acting was something I loved, but Hollywood was a different world. There were times I felt completely lost." Mr. Henderson nodded. "That's natural," he said gently. "Everyone feels lost when they start something new." Keanu looked at him. "You always said that. You used to tell us that fear means we care." The teacher smiled. "It's true. Fear isn't the enemy. It's proof that what we're doing matters to us." The host looked between them. "It sounds like those lessons stayed with you all these years." "They did," Keanu said. "There were moments in my career when I almost gave up. Things weren't working out or I wasn't getting the roles I wanted. But I remembered what Mr. Henderson told me once, that it's not about being perfect, it's about being honest. That's what kept me going." The host smiled, clearly touched. "That's beautiful. Honesty in art and in life." Keanu nodded. "Yeah, I think honesty is everything." The screen behind them changed again. This time it showed an old video, not from a movie, but from a small community theater production. The colors were faded and the image was slightly blurry, but there was no mistaking who the young man on stage was. The host said, "We found something special. This was recorded during your school years. I think you might recognize this performance." Keanu leaned forward, his eyes widening. On the screen, a much younger version of himself stood under a spotlight, delivering lines with passion and intensity. The small audience clapped, and the camera panned to show Mr. Henderson standing proudly in the wings, smiling at his student. The crowd in the studio gasped softly. Keanu laughed in disbelief, covering his mouth with his hand. "I can't believe you found that," he said. Mr. Henderson chuckled. "That was your first real performance. You were terrified, remember?" Keanu nodded, still staring at the screen. "Yeah, but it was the first time I felt free." The teacher smiled. "You belonged on that stage. You always did." The camera cut to the audience. Many people were wiping their eyes. The emotion in the room was real, not from sadness, but from witnessing something pure and heartfelt. The host spoke gently. "That moment was almost 4 decades ago, and yet here you both are sitting side by side. It's like the story came full circle." Keanu looked at his teacher, his expression soft and full of warmth. "It really does feel like that," he said. "Life has this strange way of bringing things back around." The host smiled. "You know, Mr. Henderson, not every teacher gets to see what becomes of their students. How does it feel sitting here today, seeing where he is now?" The teacher's eyes glistened as he spoke. "It feels wonderful. You never really know the impact you'll have on someone. You hope you're doing something meaningful, but most of the time you just do your best and move on. Seeing him here today, not just for his success, but for the person he's become, it means everything." Keanu reached over and gently squeezed his teacher's hand. "You're a big part of why I am who I am," he said. The host paused, giving the audience time to absorb the moment. Then he said softly, "That's what this show is about. It's not just about fame or success. It's about connection. It's about gratitude." The lights dimmed slightly and soft music played again. The screen behind them faded to a simple quote. "A good teacher can change a student's life. Sometimes. Forever." The host continued, "Mr. Henderson, you told us before the show that there was something you always wanted to say to Keanu, but you never had the chance. Would you like to share that now?" The teacher looked surprised for a moment, then smiled. "Yes," he said quietly. The audience fell silent. Even Keanu leaned forward, curious. Mr. Henderson took a breath and said, "Keanu, when you left school, I always wondered what would happen to you. You had so much heart. You were kind, respectful, and deeply thoughtful. But you were also unsure of yourself. I used to worry that the world might be too harsh for someone like you. That maybe people wouldn't see the goodness I saw." He paused for a moment. The studio was silent. "But then I saw you grow," he continued, "not just as an actor, but as a person. Every time I saw you in a film, I didn't just see a performance. I saw the same boy who cared about fixing props, who stayed late to help others, who never forgot to say thank you. That's what I'm proud of. Not the fame, not the success, but the man you became." Keanu sat completely still. His eyes shone and his lips trembled slightly as he tried to speak. "Thank you," he said softly. "That means more than I can say." The audience started clapping, not loudly, but in that quiet, emotional way people do when they've been moved. The host smiled. "That was beautiful," he said. "And I think everyone here can feel the love and respect between you two." Keanu nodded, taking a slow breath. "It's strange," he said. "You go through life thinking you're doing it on your own. But when moments like this happen, you realize how many people helped shape you. How many people believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself." Mr. Henderson nodded. "That's the truth. None of us get there alone." For the next few minutes, they spoke more about the power of mentorship and kindness, how one person's encouragement can change the course of someone's life. The audience listened quietly, fully engaged as if they were part of the conversation themselves. At one point, the host asked Mr. Henderson, "Do you still teach?" He laughed softly. "I retired a few years ago," he said, "but I still visit the school sometimes. I talk to the students about following their passions. I tell them about a boy I once taught, a boy who cared deeply, who worked hard, and who grew up to remind the world that kindness still matters." Keanu smiled, shaking his head. "You're going to make me cry again," he said, and the audience laughed warmly. As the segment came to an end, the host said, "Before we close this part of the show, we'd like to play something special. It's a message from some of Mr. Henderson's former students, people he taught over the years, all saying thank you." The screen filled with short video clips of people, young and old, sharing brief messages of gratitude. Some were teachers themselves now. Others were parents, artists, and workers in different fields. Each one said the same thing in their own way. "Thank you for believing in me." When the video ended, the audience stood and applauded. Mr. Henderson looked touched beyond words. Keanu stood too and gave him another hug. a long, emotional one. When they finally sat back down, Keanu said softly, "You changed a lot of lives, not just mine." The teacher smiled with watery eyes. "That's the goal," he said. "We don't get to choose how far people go, but we can help them start the journey." The camera zoomed in slowly on Keanu's face. His expression was peaceful, proud, grateful, and humble all at once. As the host wrapped up the segment, he said, "Sometimes we forget to thank the people who helped us get where we are. But it's never too late. Tonight we saw what gratitude looks like, and it's beautiful." The audience clapped again as the lights faded. Keanu looked over at his teacher one more time and said quietly, "You have no idea how much this means to me." And in that gentle moment, surrounded by lights and applause, it wasn't about fame, success, or cameras. It was about two people, one who gave, one who remembered, sharing a simple truth. Kindness lasts forever. The applause slowly faded, and the studio grew quiet again. The lights dimmed just enough to make the moment feel more personal, more intimate. Keanu sat back, still trying to take everything in. It had already been one of the most emotional nights of his life, and yet he could tell there was still more to come. The host looked over at him kindly. "Keanu," he said softly, "we've talked about your early days, your journey, and this beautiful reunion with your teacher. But there's something we'd like to ask you both to share tonight. Something deeper, not about movies or fame, but about life itself." Keanu gave a small nod. "Okay," he said quietly. "I can do that." The host continued. "When we spoke before the show, you mentioned that there was a time, years ago, when you almost gave up on acting, when you thought maybe you weren't good enough. Would you tell us about that?" Keanu leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped together. He took a slow breath before speaking. "Yeah," he said. "It was a long time ago. I was still young, still trying to figure everything out. I had been auditioning for roles, getting rejected again and again. I thought maybe I wasn't meant for it." He paused, remembering. "I was living in a small apartment at the time. I had a stack of scripts on my table, but none of them felt right. I started to think about what else I could do. Maybe work behind the camera, maybe quit altogether. And then one night I got this letter." The audience grew quiet. Even the host leaned forward. "A letter?" Keanu nodded. "Yeah, it was from my old school. They were doing another play, and one of the teachers, not Mr. Henderson, but someone else, had asked if I'd come back to talk to the students. I almost said no. I thought, what do I have to offer? But I went anyway. And when I walked into that classroom, I saw these kids, nervous, excited, full of dreams, and it hit me. I remembered what it felt like to be one of them, and I remembered who first made me believe I could do this." He turned to his teacher and smiled softly. "It was you," he said. Mr. Henderson smiled warmly but didn't interrupt. Keanu continued, "I told those kids the same thing you told me years ago, that talent is good, but heart is better. That kindness and effort matter more than being perfect. And after that day, I went home and decided I wasn't going to quit. I'd keep going no matter how hard it got." The audience clapped gently, moved by the story. The host said softly, "That's incredible. And it all came back to what your teacher gave you." Keanu nodded. "Yeah, he gave me belief. That's the most powerful thing you can give someone." The host turned to Mr. Henderson. "Do you remember those times? Did you ever think Keanu might give up back then?" The teacher sighed softly, thinking. "He had doubts," he said. "I could see it. But that's normal. Every young person doubts themselves. The important part is what they do with that doubt. Some people let it stop them. Others turn it into fuel. Keanu did that. He took his pain, his uncertainty, and turned it into something beautiful." Keanu looked down, smiling humbly. "I tried," he said. The teacher chuckled. "You did more than try, my boy." The audience laughed softly. The host smiled too. "It's so special to see how your words stayed with him all these years," he said. "It's rare to have that kind of bond." Mr. Henderson nodded. "When you teach, you don't always know what will stay with your students. You just hope something will. Seeing that it did, that's a gift." The camera focused on Keanu's face. His eyes glistened, not from sadness, but from deep gratitude. He took a small breath as if trying to hold back the emotion. "You know," he said quietly, "when you're young, you don't realize how much people do for you. You just think life moves fast and everyone will always be there. But as you get older, you start to look back. You start to see all the people who helped you become who you are, and sometimes you never got the chance to thank them properly. That's what tonight means to me. The audience stayed silent, listening closely. Every word felt personal, honest, and full of warmth. The host leaned back slightly, giving the moment space to breathe. Then he turned to Mr. Henderson. Would you like to tell Keanu something you've never told him before? The teacher smiled softly. Actually, yes, he said. He looked at Keanu with a gentle, steady gaze. There was a moment many years ago that you never knew about, he began. After one of your school performances, I was sitting in the empty theater, cleaning up the stage. Another teacher came in and said, You really think that kid's going to make it? And I said, Yes, I do. They laughed and said, Why? He's quiet. He's not like the others. And I said, That's exactly why. He feels things deeply. And one day people will see that. He paused, his voice soft but full of emotion. And I was right. Keanu blinked several times, trying to keep his composure. He smiled faintly but couldn't speak for a moment. Finally, he said, You have no idea what that means to me. Mr. Henderson smiled. You earned every bit of it. The host, clearly touched, said, I think everyone here feels the love in this room tonight. The audience clapped again. Some wiping their eyes, the host continued. You know, we talk a lot about success and fame. But what really matters are these moments. The ones that remind us we're all human. We all need someone to believe in us. Keanu nodded slowly. That's true, he said. And if I've learned anything, it's that the best thing you can do with your success is to give that belief back to someone else. The audience clapped softly again. The energy in the room felt warm and full. Not loud, not showy, but deeply connected. Then the host said, We actually have another surprise, Mr. Henderson. While preparing for this show, we spoke to some of your former colleagues. They told us something very touching, something we'd like to share with both of you. The lights dimmed again and the big screen behind them lit up. It showed a short clip, footage of Mr. Henderson years ago in his classroom teaching a group of students. His voice was calm and full of passion as he encouraged them to speak louder, to be brave, to believe in themselves. The students laughed and cheered, clearly inspired by him. As the video ended, the host said, That was almost 40 years ago. You've changed a lot of lives since then. Mr. Henderson's eyes glistened. It's been the joy of my life, he said softly. Keanu smiled at him. You still have that same light, he said. The same energy. It's like nothing ever changed. The teacher laughed. Maybe a few wrinkles, he said, and the audience chuckled warmly. Then the host said, Before we close this part of the show, we'd like to do something special. Mr. Henderson, we'd like to give you a chance to share a message, not just to Keanu, but to anyone out there watching who might need encouragement. The teacher thought for a moment, then spoke slowly. If you're watching this and you feel lost or uncertain, remember this. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to keep showing up. There will be people who doubt you, and there will be times when you doubt yourself. But somewhere out there, someone believes in you, even if you don't know it yet. Find that person and listen to them. And when you can, be that person for someone else. The studio was silent again. It was the kind of silence that only comes after something truly heartfelt. Keanu wiped his eyes gently, smiling through the emotion. That's exactly why you were the best teacher, he said softly. The audience started clapping again, a slow, meaningful applause that filled the room. The host smiled warmly. Thank you both, he said. What we witnessed tonight wasn't just a reunion. It was a reminder of what really matters: kindness, gratitude, and belief. Keanu nodded. Yeah, he said. This means everything to me. Thank you for bringing us together. Mr. Henderson smiled. Thank you for remembering me, he said. The host closed the segment, his voice calm but full of feeling. Tonight we saw something rare, a bond that stood the test of time. A teacher who gave his heart, and a student who never forgot. It's a story of gratitude and proof that even the smallest act of belief can change a life forever. As the lights slowly faded, the camera caught one last image. Keanu and his teacher sitting side by side, holding hands, smiling quietly as the audience stood in applause. And though the cameras would soon turn off, everyone in that studio, and everyone watching from home, knew they had witnessed something unforgettable. The applause in the studio gradually faded, leaving a quiet warmth that lingered in the air. Keanu Reeves remained seated next to his old teacher, Mr. Henderson, both of them still smiling, their eyes reflecting the mix of emotions that had filled the room over the past hour. The audience had witnessed something rare, a genuine connection, a story of gratitude and human kindness that felt alive, not scripted. The host leaned forward, giving the moment space to breathe. Before we end tonight, we wanted to ask both of you about the lessons that stay with you. Keanu, we've heard you talk about belief, perseverance, and kindness, but now that you've seen your teacher again, how does that make you reflect on your journey? Keanu took a slow, deep breath. His gaze shifted from the lights to Mr. Henderson and then out into the audience. It's strange, he said softly. I've spent so much time thinking about where I've been, what I've done, and the people I've met along the way. And tonight, seeing him again, I realize how much of everything I've accomplished isn't just about talent or luck. It's about the people who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, people who showed me patience, kindness, and guidance. He paused, a faint smile touching his lips. Mr. Henderson was the first person who did that. And now, after all these years, I finally get to say thank you properly. It's overwhelming in the best way. Mr. Henderson's eyes softened, glistening slightly. You've always been a remarkable person, Keanu. You just didn't know it yet. Watching you grow into the man you are now, it's more than a teacher could ever hope to see. The host nodded. It's incredible, isn't it? The way life brings things full circle. Keanu leaned back slightly, reflecting on those words. It really is. And I think that's something people often forget. Life isn't just about the big moments you see on screen or the applause or the awards. It's about the small gestures, the people who notice you, the encouragement that stays with you when no one else sees. Those are the moments that shape a person more than anything else. The audience listened quietly, absorbed by his sincerity. Even in the bright lights and cameras, his voice carried the calm, humble honesty that had always defined him. The host smiled. Mr. Henderson, what about you? Seeing Keanu now and knowing what you helped him become, how does that feel? The teacher took a moment, gathering his thoughts. It's humbling, he said. You invest your time, your heart in teaching and mentoring, and you never really know what will come of it. And then decades later, you see a student like Keanu, a person who has not only succeeded but remained kind, grounded, and thoughtful. That's the best reward imaginable. It reminds you why you do what you do, why you keep trying even when it's hard. Keanu reached over and placed a hand gently on Mr. Henderson's shoulder. I wouldn't be here without you, he said quietly. The teacher smiled, shaking his head. And I wouldn't have believed it possible without you either. For a few moments, neither spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was full, warm, and full of understanding. Then the host spoke again, his voice soft. You know, there's a lesson here that goes beyond movies and fame. It's about recognizing those who've helped you and giving that belief forward. That's something we could all use more of in our lives. Keanu nodded thoughtfully. Absolutely. And I try to do that whenever I can. If someone needs encouragement, a word of kindness, or a reminder they're capable, I try to give it, because I know how powerful it can be. I remember what it felt like to have someone believe in me when I didn't believe in myself. And I want to pass that on. The host smiled warmly. That's a beautiful message. The cameras switched to a wider shot of the studio, capturing the audience clapping quietly. Some people had tears in their eyes. Others were smiling, clearly touched by the authenticity in the room. It wasn't a spectacle. It was a real human story. A teacher who saw potential, a student who carried it forward, and the unspoken bond that lasted through decades. Then the host said, Keanu, before we end, there's one last surprise we prepared for you. It's a letter from a person who's followed your journey for years, someone who has been deeply inspired by your life. Keanu looked curious, leaning forward slightly. A stagehand handed him an envelope. He opened it slowly, unfolding the paper inside. As he read, his expression changed subtly. His eyes widened, then softened, then filled with tears. He looked up at Mr. Henderson, voice trembling slightly. This is incredible, he said. The host smiled. Would you like to share a little of it? Keanu nodded, taking a deep breath. It says, Thank you for showing us that it's possible to be strong, kind, and humble all at once. Thank you for reminding us that the people we are is more important than the fame we earn. Your journey is a lesson in humanity, and your gratitude for those who shaped you inspires all of us. The audience clapped again, moved by the sincerity in his voice. Keanu's hands shook slightly as he folded the letter back into the envelope. I didn't expect this, he said softly. It's beautiful, and it reminds me of everything Mr. Henderson taught me, that our actions, our care for others, are the real story. Mr. Henderson reached over and squeezed his hand gently. You've carried that lesson beautifully, Keanu, he said. The host leaned forward. And now, as we close tonight's show, we'd like to ask both of you to share one final thought, something for the audience, something for the people watching at home who might need encouragement or hope. Keanu took a slow breath. I think life is full of challenges, doubts, and moments when you feel like you can't go on. But the people who believe in you, the encouragement you receive, and the kindness you share, that's what matters most. Even if you feel small, even if the world seems big and overwhelming, never underestimate what a little belief can do. Find the people who care and be the person who cares for someone else. That's the most important thing you can do. The audience nodded quietly, clearly moved by his words. Mr. Henderson smiled, his voice steady but emotional. I would say this. Never forget that even the smallest gesture can change a life. A kind word, a moment of patience, a teacher's belief. It can stay with someone forever. You never know whose life you're shaping, but every act of care counts. Keanu reached over and shook his teacher's hand warmly. Thank you, he said simply. The host smiled. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what tonight was all about. It's not just a story of a reunion. It's a story of humanity, of belief, kindness, and gratitude. It's proof that one person can make a difference and that those differences echo through a lifetime. The lights dimmed, but the warmth in the room remained. The audience rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, some visibly moved to tears. Keanu and Mr. Henderson stood together, waving quietly, smiling and soaking in the love and respect from the crowd. As the cameras slowly pulled back, the host's voice carried over the fading music. Remember, it's never too late to say thank you, to believe in someone, or to give encouragement. And sometimes, the simplest acts of kindness are the ones that change the world. Keanu looked at his teacher one last time. I hope more people get to feel what I feel tonight, he said softly. Mr. Henderson smiled. They will, he said, if they remember to care just like you have. The final shot captured the two men standing side by side, framed by the bright lights of the studio, their smiles full of gratitude, humility, and a quiet joy that spoke louder than any applause. And though the cameras would turn off and the studio would empty, the story would stay with everyone who witnessed it. Not just because of who Keanu Reeves was or the fame he carried, but because of the timeless lesson they both had shared. That belief, gratitude, and kindness are the real stories of a life well lived. As the credits rolled, viewers at home could feel it too. A reminder that the people who care for us, guide us, and believe in us are the ones who make us stronger, braver, and more human. That even a simple act of belief, a small word of encouragement, or a teacher's patience can echo through decades, shaping lives in ways we may never fully understand. Keanu Reeves and Mr. Henderson left the stage together, not as celebrity and teacher, but as two human beings who had shared a journey, a bond, and a lifetime of gratitude. And the world, watching, had been touched by something real. Something that could not be scripted, staged, or repeated. It was a reminder for everyone, everywhere, that true connection and heartfelt gratitude are what make life unforgettable.